Today I'm going to tell you a story, so haunting it lingers in your chest long after the fire dies down. Set deep in the western frontier where the wind moves through dry grass and every shadow seems to remember something older than the living. It's a place where ancient laws, restless spirits, and human guilt cross paths in the quietest corners of the land. It all began with something small, just a single stone shifted on an old grave. But that tiny change was enough to wake what should have remained buried. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The afternoon sun hung low, copper red against the dry hills, but the wind had died without warning. Taza felt it first in the sudden stillness of his own breath. He had been tracking a lone mule deer through the scrub oak, bow half drawn, when the air stopped moving. No rustle in the yucca, no distant call of raven or hawk. The world held its breath with him. He lowered the bow slowly. The deer had vanished into shadow anyway. Ahead, where the trail bent toward the old burial ground, the ground looked wrong. A faint scuff in the dust, human, recent. Someone had stepped too close to the low mound of stones that marked his uncle's resting place. One flat stone, the one placed last in the circle, had shifted an inch. Beneath it, the edge of a bone awl glinted, uncovered. Taza crouched. The smell of dry earth rose sharp in his nostrils, mixed with something older. Sage smoke long gone cold, and the faint sourness of things left too long in the sun. He did not touch the stone. His fingers hovered, then drew back. The law was clear. The dead stay where they are placed. To move even a finger's width invites the ghost to follow. He stayed there a long time, squatting in the dust, listening to the silence press against his ears. His heart beat steady, but the rhythm felt borrowed. Somewhere inside, a memory stirred. Years ago, the night they buried the uncle, Taza had lingered after the others left. He had reached out once, just once, to straighten the blanket over the body before the stones were piled. No one saw. He told himself it was respect. The ghost had never come then. Now the quiet stretched thinner than rawhide. A single crow lifted from a piñon far off, black against the sky, and did not call. Taza rose. He turned away from the mound without looking back. He reached the camp the light had thickened to amber. Teepees stood in their half-circle, smoke rising thin and straight. Children ran between the lodges, but their voices sounded small, swallowed by the same stillness that had followed him down the trail. Inside his own teepee, his daughter Nita sat cross-legged near the fire pit, playing with a bundle of dried grass. She looked up when he ducked through the door flap. Her eyes were bright, untroubled. "Father," she said, "the wind stopped today, like it was afraid." Taza knelt, set his bow against the lodge pole. He reached out and touched her hair, once, lightly. The gesture was small, but his hand stayed there a moment longer than it should have. Outside, the first faint breath of wind returned. It moved low across the ground, stirring dust against the canvas. The flap lifted slightly, then fell back. Taza sat in the growing dark, staring at the coals. He did not speak. He did not move. The wind kept coming, slow and deliberate, as though it had remembered something it was supposed to forget. The fire in the teepee had burned down to a dull red pulse by the time Taza ducked through the low door. Smoke hung thick under the poles, smelling of juniper and old hides. Nita sat on the far side of the fire pit, knees drawn up, twisting a thin strip of rawhide between her fingers. She did not look up at first. The small grave mound, her grandfather's, covered now only by a flat stone and a scatter of dry grass, stood just outside the flap, close enough that the shadow of it fell across the canvas when the sun was right. Taza lowered himself to the ground opposite her, knees cracking softly. He set his bow beside him, the wood still warm from the afternoon sun. For a long moment neither spoke. The coals popped once, sending a spark curling upward. Nita's voice came small, almost lost in the crackle. "Grandfather's name is still strong today. I said it when the grass bent wrong, to make it straight again." Taza's hand paused halfway to the water gourd. The name, spoken aloud, clear as a struck bell, hung between them. He felt the air thicken in his chest. The law was older than the mountains. The dead do not return unless called. To speak the name is to open the door they have already walked through. He looked at her. Her small face was calm, the way children's faces are when they do not yet understand the weight of words. She kept twisting the rawhide, tighter, then looser. Outside, the evening wind had returned, but it moved differently now. Low, brushing the ground like fingers searching. No birds settled in the piñons near camp. The dogs had gone quiet. Taza reached across the fire and touched her wrist, stopping the motion. His fingers were rough, calloused from bowstring and stone. "Some names stay where they are put," he said, voice low, steady, like stones on the mound. Moving them brings what should stay gone. Nita blinked once. She did not pull away, but her eyes searched his face. "But I only said it quiet, like a whisper to the grass." He let go of her wrist. The silence stretched again, longer this time. Then she coughed, once, dry and sharp, the sound small but wrong in the close air of the lodge. It was not the cough of dust or cold. It was deeper, like something turning inside. Taza stared at the coals. His own breath felt shallow, borrowed. He remembered the night they buried the old man, the blanket he had straightened, the hand he had let linger too long on the still chest before the stones were laid. No one had seen, but the ground had. Nita coughed again, softer, but the second time left a faint rasp in her throat. She rubbed her chest with the heel of her hand, puzzled. Taza stood without a word. He stepped outside. The sky had gone the color of bruised iron. Stars were beginning to prick through, cold and distant. He sat on the packed earth near the teepee wall, back straight against the pole, arms resting on his knees. The wind moved past him, carrying the faint scent of sage and something older, dry bone left too long in the sun. He did not sleep. He watched the dark, listening for the sound of another cough from inside, counting the spaces between them. Somewhere far off, a single coyote yipped once, then fell silent. The wind kept moving, slow and patient, carrying the night deeper into the camp. The fire at the center of the camp burned low and steady, fed by dry juniper that snapped like small bones. Shadows stretched long across the ground, pooling between the tippies. The people sat in their usual half-circle, men on one side, women and children on the other, faces lit copper by the coals. No one laughed tonight. The air carried the faint smell of roasted meat from earlier, but the portions had been small, and the sharing quieter than usual. Taza approached from the edge of the light, boots soft on the packed earth. He had waited until the talk turned to old stories before stepping closer. The elder, old man Cochise's brother, sat nearest the flames, his voice low and measured as he spoke of winters long past, of hunts when the deer came down from the high country without fear. When Taza's shadow fell across the circle, the elder paused. Eyes turned. Not all at once, but slow, like stones settling after a slide. "Sit," the elder said. Not an invitation, a command. Taza lowered himself to the ground at the rim of the light. Nita was not with him. She lay inside the teepee, wrapped in the old blanket, breathing shallow. The cough had come again at dusk, sharper, wetter. He had left her with her mother's sister to watch. The elder stirred the fire with a stick. Sparks rose, died quick. "The child coughs," he said. No question in it. The kind of cough that starts in the chest and stays. A murmur moved through the circle, soft as wind through dry grass. Taza kept his gaze on the coals. He felt the weight of eyes on him. Not angry, only careful. "The sickness comes when something is out of place," the elder went on. "When a name is spoken that should rest. When a hand touches what should not be touched. The ghost walks then. It walks quiet at first. Then it walks in the blood." No one looked at Taza directly now, but the space around him felt wider, colder. Across the fire, his cousin Red Shirt shifted his weight, then rose without a word and moved to sit farther down the line. He did not look back. The place where he had sat stayed empty. No one moved to fill it. Taza's throat tightened. He could smell the smoke on his own clothes, the sweat dried cold on his skin. He remembered the night they buried the old man, how he had lingered, how his fingers had brushed the blanket one last time. Respect, he had told himself. The ground had remembered differently. The elder spoke again, voice flat. "Some sickness stays with one lodge. Some sickness walks to the next. We do not choose who carries it, but we choose who comes near the fire." Taza felt the words settle like dust in his lungs. He could speak now. Say the cough was only dust, only cold air. Say the child would mend by morning. Or he could name the thing that had happened years ago, the touch that should never have been, and let the shame fall on his own shoulders instead of the girl's. He stayed silent. His hands rested open on his knees. The fire popped once, sending a spark into the dark. Red Shirt's wife passed the gourd of water without offering it to him. It went around the circle and stopped short. The elder looked straight at Taza then. "Go back to your lodge," he said. "Watch the child. If the cough deepens by morning, we will speak again." Taza rose. No one watched him leave. The firelight stayed behind him, small and distant. Inside the teepee, Nita lay curled on the robe, cheeks flushed dark. Her breath came quick and shallow. She opened her eyes when he knelt beside her. "Father," she whispered, "it hurts here." She pressed a small hand to her chest. Taza touched her forehead. The skin burned under his palm. He looked toward the door flap, where the night pressed close. To move her now, carry her to the medicine woman in the next valley, would mean walking through the dark with sickness already in her lungs, risking the ghost following farther. To stay meant watching the fever climb, waiting for what the elder had not said aloud, that the sickness might not leave until the wrong thing was set right. He sat beside her in the dark, listening to the ragged rhythm of her breathing. The wind outside moved slow against the canvas, patient, waiting. He did not sleep. He only watched the coals die down to ash, one small glow at a time. The first light came thin and gray, bleeding across the hills like spilled water. Taza sat outside the teepee on a flat stone, legs crossed, wet stone in one hand and the hunting knife in the other. The blade moved slow along the stone, once, twice, pause. Each pass quieter than the last. The sound was small, steady, almost lost in the morning stillness. Inside the lodge, Nita's breathing came ragged, each inhale a faint rasp that carried through the canvas. He had not slept. The coals from last night's fire had gone to ash hours ago, and the cold had settled deep in his joints. He kept his eyes on the knife, watching the edge catch the pale light. But his mind stayed on the child. The fever had climbed in the dark. She had tossed once, twice, murmuring words he did not want to hear. Footsteps approached from the east. Slow, deliberate. Taza did not look up. He knew the gait. Old man Cochise's brother. the elder whose shadow fell longer than most. The man stopped a good 10 paces away, out where the wind could carry words without crossing the threshold. He did not sit. He did not come closer. The elder's voice came low, rough as dry bark. Taza of the line of Cochise's brother. The child still burns? Taza's hand paused on the whetstone. The full name, spoken with the ancestor's weight, landed like a stone dropped in still water. It was not a greeting. It was a reminder. The elder used it to mark distance, to mark the stain. The sickness is not new, the elder continued. It walks when the dead are not properly sent away. When a hand lingers where it should not, when the blanket is straightened after breath has stopped. The ghost does not forget. Taza kept his gaze on the blade. The edge gleamed now, sharper than it needed to be. He felt the words settle in his chest, heavy as wet earth. The memory rose unbidden. The night of the burial. The others already walking away. The blanket still warm under his palm. He had told himself it was care. The ground had told a different story. From inside the tipi came a small sound. Nita's voice, faint, drifting in fever. "Grandfather, grandfather." The name again, soft as breath, but clear enough to carry on the wind. Taza's fingers tightened on the knife handle. The whetstone slipped once, scraping metal against stone with a harsh scrape. He set both down carefully, hands flat on his thighs. The elder waited. The silence stretched. No one else moved in camp. The dogs lay still. Even the horses stood quiet at the picket line. "The fire will not be shared today," the elder said at last. "No meat, no water from the common spring. Not until the wrong is set right." He turned then, walking back the way he had come, footsteps fading into the dust. Taza sat motionless a long time. The sun climbed higher, warming the stone beneath him, but the cold stayed in his bones. He looked toward the distant ridge where the sacred ground lay hidden among the oaks. Low mounds, old stones, places no one approached without cause. The walk there would take hours in daylight, longer at night. To go alone meant risking the ghost following. To stay meant watching the fever take what little strength the child had left. He rose slowly. Dust clung to his leggings. He stepped toward the teepee flap, hand reaching for the hide. Inside, Nita stirred. Her eyes opened, glassy, searching. She lifted a small hand toward him, fingers trembling. The grip when it came was weak but sure, clinging, not letting go. She did not speak. She only looked at him, eyes wide with something beyond fever, trust, fear, a child's silent plea. Taza knelt. He covered her hand with his own. The heat of her skin burned against his palm. Outside, the wind rose again, low, steady, carrying dust across the empty camp. It moved past the teepee, past the cold fire pit, toward the ridge where the old stones waited. He did not move. He only sat there, holding her hand, listening to the wind, search for what had been left undone. The moon had thinned to a pale sickle by the time Taza reached the sacred ground. He had walked the long ridge in darkness, boots scraping soft against loose shale, breath fogging in the high cold. No blanket, no extra hide, just the thin cotton shirt and the weight of the small bundle of sage tied at his belt. The night air bit through cloth and skin alike, raising gooseflesh along his arms. The mounds lay low among the oaks, stones arranged in careful circles, half hidden by grass gone brittle with frost. He stopped at the edge, close enough to see the flat stone he had last touched years ago. It had shifted again, only a finger's width, but enough. Beneath it, the edge of a bone awl showed white in the moonlight, uncovered once more. Taza knelt. He untied the sage, broke a small branch, and struck flint to steel. The spark caught slow. He cupped the flame with both hands until it steadied, then fed it the dry leaves. Smoke rose thin and sharp, smelling of resin and old earth. He leaned close, lips moving without sound. Words to Yusin, words he had learned as a boy, words he had never thought he would need to speak alone. The wind answered first. It came low from the north, stirring the smoke sideways instead of upward. The sage flared brighter for a moment, then guttered. Taza fed it again, fingers trembling now from cold and something deeper. He kept his eyes on the mound. The bone all gleamed, stubborn, refusing to stay hidden. A shadow moved at this corner of vision, not wind, not branch. He turned his head slow. Nothing there, only the dark between trees. He looked back. The shadow had shifted again, closer this time, shaped like a man standing still. Taza's breath caught. He knew the outline, tall, shoulders squared the way his uncle had stood before the sickness took him. The figure did not move forward. It only watched. From far down the valley, a thin thread of smoke rose from the main camp, straight, deliberate, no drift. The signal fire. They had lit it late, the way they did when a decision had been reached. No water from the spring, no path to the common ground. The smoke set it plain. Taza's teeth chattered once, sharp. He had not brought the heavy robe. The walk had seemed short enough in his mind. Now the cold pressed in, numbing fingertips, slowing blood. He fed the sage again. The smoke curled upward this time, thin and reluctant. He whispered once more, short, broken phrases. The words tasted dry in his mouth. The shadow at the edge of the oaks did not fade. It waited. Taza sat back on his heels. The flame had burned down to embers. The sage was gone. He looked at his hands, red from cold, knuckles white where he had gripped too hard. The mound stayed as it was. No sign the earth had heard. No sign it had not. He rose stiffly. The wind followed him as he turned back toward camp, pushing at his shoulders, carrying the faint scent of sage and something older. Dry bone warmed by fire that should never have touched it. Halfway down the ridge he heard it. A single footfall behind him, soft as moccasin on dust. Not heavy, not hurried, just there. He did not turn. He kept walking, breath shallow, eyes fixed on the faint glow of his own teepee far below. The camp lay dark except for the signal fire still burning, its smoke straight as a spear. When he reached the flat ground near the spring, the path was blocked. A single pole had been driven into the earth across the trail, wrapped once with rawhide. No words, no face, only the sign. Taza stopped. The wind moved past him, cold and steady, carrying the echo of that single footfall he had not dared look back at. The sun rose pale and thin, barely warming the frost on the grass. Taza stood at the edge of the gathering ground, arms folded tight across his chest, watching the people form their circle a long stone's throw from his tipi. No one had come near the lodge since the signal fire the night before. The dogs stayed low, tails tucked. Even the horses shifted uneasily at the picket line, heads low, ears flicking toward the quiet. The elder stood at the center, back to the low morning light, voice carrying flat and even across the open space. The sickness has touched one lodge. It walks the blood. If it stays, it will walk to every lodge. We do not choose the path of the ghost. We only choose to keep it from our own fires. No one spoke against him. Heads nodded once, slow. Taza felt the words settle like cold dust in his throat. His cousin Red Shirt stood near the elder now, arms crossed the same way Taza's were. But his eyes never once lifted toward the teepee or the man standing outside it. The turning away was complete. No glance, no nod, no word. Just absence. Inside the open flap of the teepee, Nita lay on the robe, small chest rising and falling too quick. She coughed once, wet, ragged, and a thin thread of blood flecked her lips. Her mother's sister wiped it away with a corner of blanket, eyes down, saying nothing. The child's hand twitched once, reaching for something not there. Taza's fingers curled into fists at his sides. The knuckles whitened. He could feel the tremor start in his arms, small, hidden. He had carried her through the night, held her when the fever made her shake. Now the circle stood between him and the spring, between him and the hunting trails that fed them all. To stay would mean watching the sickness spread from his fire to theirs. To leave would mean walking away from the ground that held his uncle's stones, his father's name, the only place the ancestors knew to find him. The elder's voice rose again, steady as stone. The camp of Taza will not drink from the spring. The trails north and east are closed to them. Until the wrong is burned clean, they stay apart. A low murmur answered. Agreement, not anger. Survival spoke louder than kinship. One of the women pulled her child closer, turning the small face away from the direction of Taza's lodge. The boy looked back once, curious, then was tugged forward. Taza took one step, then another. The ground felt harder under his boots, each footfall heavier than the last. The circle did not open for him. He stopped at the rim, close enough that his shadow fell across the nearest stones. The elder turned his head slightly. Eyes met eyes. No warmth, no hate, only the weight of what had to be done. Taza's voice came low, rough from a night without sleep. Ghost confai tu do tre, not tu toy. The words dropped into the circle like a stone into still water. Ripples moved, heads lifted, breaths caught, but no one answered. The wind, which had been moving low across the grass, stopped dead. The air went thick, silent. Even the horses stilled. Taza stood there, hands still fisted at his sides, eyes fixed on the elder. The circle held its breath with him. No one moved. No one spoke. Behind him, from the teepee, came the faint, wet sound of another cough. Small, final. The silence stretched, heavy as wet hide, waiting for what came next. The sun had dropped behind the ridge, leaving the sky the color of old iron. Shadows pooled thick under the great oak that stood at the heart of the gathering place, its branches heavy with years and the weight of words spoken beneath them. A circle of stones marked the ground, flat, worn smooth by countless fires and countless feet. Taza walked into the center without hurry. No one stopped him. No one welcomed him. The people stood in their places, faces half lit by the low flames of the central fire, eyes fixed somewhere past him. Nita lay on a spread buffalo robe just outside the circle, wrapped in the blanket that had once covered her grandfather. Her mother's sister had carried her out when the elder called for it. The child's chest rose and fell too fast, each breath a shallow rasp. A thin line of blood darkened the corner of her mouth. She did not move. She only watched, small eyes wide in the firelight. The elder stood opposite Taza, arms folded, face carved from the same stone as the oaks. He waited. Taza's voice came low, steady, carrying just far enough. The ghost walks because of me, not the child. Years ago, when we laid the old man down, I stayed after the stones were placed. I touched the blanket, straightened it. My hand lingered on what was already gone. I thought it respect. The ground knew better. The words fell into the silence like stones into deep water. No ripple answered at first. Then a low murmur moved through the circle. Not anger, not pity, only recognition. Heads turned slightly. Eyes met eyes. Red Shirt looked away again, jaw tight. No one spoke his name now. The full weight of the ancestor line rested on Taza alone, and it pressed heavy. The elder's gaze did not waver. The sickness has touched more than one lodge now. A woman coughs in the night. A boy wakes with heat in his bones. If it spreads farther, the camp cannot stay whole. Taza felt the truth of it settle in his chest. Nita coughed again, wet, small, and the sound cut through the quiet like a blade. Her hand twitched on the robe. She did not cry out. She only looked at him, steady, waiting. No one stepped closer. No one offered water or meat. The circle held its distance. Trust had gone the way of the smoke. Thin, scattered, impossible to gather back. The elder spoke once more. If the wrong is not burned clean tonight, your lodge leaves the valley at first light. No trail open. No name spoken in council after. Taza looked down at the fire. Flames licked low along the wood, patient. He stepped forward. The circle parted just enough. He reached into the small bundle at his belt, the bone awl, the one piece of his uncle's that had not been burned that night. It felt cold in his palm, heavier than bone should be. He knelt at the fire's edge. The heat rose against his face, drying the sweat that had gathered cold on his skin. He held the awl out, arms steady, then dropped it into the coals. The flames answered fast, too fast. They leaped up, hungry, turning the bone black in an instant. Smoke poured thick and dark, curling upward in coils that smelled of char and something older, something unwilling to leave. The wind rose with it, sudden and sharp, whipping dust across the stones. Nita's eyes widened. She drew a breath, sharp, pained, and cried out, voice thin but clear in the rising smoke. "Grandfather!" The name hung there, spoken once more, final. The child's body arched once, then fell still. The circle went motionless. No one moved to help. No one spoke. Taza stayed kneeling, hands open above the fire, watching the smoke climb into the darkening sky. The flames burned higher, brighter, fed by what should have stayed buried. The wind kept rising, carrying the black smoke toward the ridge, toward the old mounds that waited in silence. The night had turned black and close, the moon swallowed by heavy cloud. Taza carried Nita on his back, wrapped tight in the old blanket, her small arms limp around his neck. Her weight was light, too light, and each shallow breath against his shoulder felt borrowed. He had walked the ridge alone again, boots grinding slow against shale, the bundle of remaining burial goods tied at his waist. A beaded pouch, a braided cord, the last scraps of cloth that had touched his uncle's skin. The sacred ground waited under the oaks, the mound's darker shapes in the dark. He knelt at the center mound, eased Nita down onto a spread hide, propping her against his knee so she could see the fire he would make. Her eyes were half open, glassy, but fixed on him. She did not speak. She only watched. He struck flint to steel. The spark caught the dry grass beneath the sage and wood he had gathered. Flames rose slow at first, then steadier, licking upward with the smell of resin and char. He fed the fire the last pieces one by one. The pouch, the cord, the cloth, watching each catch and blacken. The smoke climbed thick, coiling against the low sky. Taza began to sing. The song was old, low, the words for Usin drawn from memory more than voice. His throat was dry, cracked. The notes came rough, almost broken. Tears tracked down his cheeks, carving clean lines through the dust on his face. He did not wipe them. He only sang, eyes on the flames, letting the words carry what his hands could not. Around him, the shadows thickened. Figures stood at the edge of the firelight, tall, still, shoulders the shape of men long gone. His uncle among them, face half-turned, eyes hidden. Others he knew by stance alone. They did not speak. They only watched, patient as stone. The ground trembled once, light, deep, like a distant horse passing far off. The fire flared in answer, flames leaping high, hungry. Taza reached up, drew his knife, and cut a lock of his own hair at the nape. The blade scraped close to skin. He dropped the dark strand into the blaze. It hissed, vanished in a quick puff of smoke. The act was small, final. No going back from the market left. Nita's breathing stopped. One breath in, then nothing. Taza's song faltered. He pressed his palm to her chest, still warm, still rising after a long, terrible second. The next breath came weak, ragged. But it came. Her eyes fluttered, found his face again. She did not cry. She only looked. From the valley below, the camp's signal fire burned steady, a small orange eye in the dark. No one had followed. No one would come. The sickness had touched others now. The circle could not risk more. Taza sang on, voice thinner, the notes pulling from somewhere deeper than throat. The fire roared higher, fed by what should have stayed buried long ago. Black smoke poured upward, thick as oil, twisting around the child like fingers searching. He reached for her then, arms closing tight. The smoke curled closer, wrapping them both. He lifted his face to the sky and cried out once. Usin's name, raw, final. The wind stopped dead. The flames held still for a heartbeat. Silence fell absolute. No crackle, no breath of air, no distant coyote. Only the low roar of the fire and the small, labored sound of Nita's chest against his. The smoke thickened, black and heavy, curling tighter around the child in his arms. Taza held on. He did not move. The silence pressed in, waiting. The first gray light seeped across the ridge, thin as smoke, touching the oaks and the low mounds with cold fingers. Taza sat on the ground beside the dead fire, knees drawn up, back against a low stone. The ashes still held faint warmth, the smell of charred sage and bone lingering sharp in the still air. Nita lay on the hide beside him, wrapped in the blanket, chest rising slow and shallow. The fever had broken some time in the dark hours. Her skin no longer burned under his palm. Each breath came quieter now, steady enough to hold. He had not moved since the flames died. His hair hung shorter at the nape, the cut lock gone to ash. The knife rested across his knees, blade dull from use. He looked at the child without speaking, tracing the small rise and fall of her breathing with his eyes. No joy moved in him, no relief, only the weight of what had passed and what remained. Far down the valley, the camp's fires glowed small and distant, points of orange in the pale morning. Figures stood at the rim of the gathering ground, dark against the lightning sky. They did not approach. They only watched. The elder was among them, arms folded, face unreadable from this distance. Taza's gaze lifted once toward them. No one raised a hand. No one called out. The silence between the ridge and the camp was wider than the valley itself. Nita stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open. The eyes that met his were clearer now, though still heavy with what she had carried through the night. She did not smile. She only looked at him, small hand reaching to touch the edge of his sleeve. The fingers stayed there, light, steady. From the camp, the elder's voice carried on the thin wind, low, deliberate, words meant to reach without crossing ground. The ghost has drawn back. The fever cools. But the mark stays. What was touched cannot be untouched. The lodge of Taza carries the shadow still. The words hung in the air, plain as stone. No anger in them, only fact. The people shifted once, then stilled again. Red Shirt turned his face away. A woman pulled her shawl tighter. The circle did not break. It simply held its distance. Taza felt the finality settle deep in his chest. No lodge waited for them now. No spring. No trail shared. The name of his line would not be spoken around the fires after this morning. Not in welcome, not in memory. Only in the quiet way people speak of things best left behind. He looked down at Nita. Her hand stayed on his sleeve. Her eyes held his, calm, knowing in a way no child should know. She had seen the figures in the smoke, heard the name called in the dark. She carried it now, too, the memory of the dead and the living pressed together in one small body. Taza rose slowly. Dust clung to his leggings. He bent, lifted the child in his arms, careful, steady. She rested her head against his shoulder, breath warm on his neck. The blanket slipped a little. He drew it higher without a word. He turned his back to the camp. The valley stretched ahead. Open ground, unfamiliar ridges, places the ancestors had not walked with him. To stay here meant living apart, marked, watched from afar until the last ember of trust died. To go meant leaving the mounds, the oaks, the ground that held every name he carried. He took one step, then another. The wind rose behind him, low and steady, pushing at his shoulders without warmth. Nita lifted her head slightly, her eyes opened wider, looking past him toward the horizon. No words passed between them, only the small sound of her breathing and the soft crunch of his boots on dry earth. The campfires dwindled behind them, small and far. The silence followed, patient, waiting for whatever came next. The sun hung low at the edge of the world, a dull red disk bleeding into the horizon. Taza walked slow across the open ground, boots sinking soft into dry earth, still warm from the day. Nita's small hand rested in his, fingers loose but sure. She stepped careful beside him, each footfall light, testing the new ground. The hide blanket was folded over his shoulder. In his other hand he carried nothing but a small pouch of ashes from the sacred fire. Gray, still faintly warm through the leather. No words passed between them. The wind moved gentle now, brushing low across the grass, carrying the scent of sage and distant pine. Birds called from the scrub oaks far off, short, clear notes that answered one another without hurry. The sickness had left the child's lungs. Her breath came even, though thin. No fever lingered in her skin. The ghost had drawn back as the elders said it would. But the price stayed. Behind them the valley fell away, the camp a small dark cluster against the ridge. Fires glowed faint, points of light that no longer called them home. No smoke rose to greet them. No dogs barked in welcome. The mounds under the oaks were hidden now by distance and dusk, the stones that held names and memories growing smaller with every step. Taza did not look back. His eyes stayed forward, tracing the line where earth met sky. The weight in his chest was not anger, not grief, only the quiet knowledge that what had been his ground no longer held space for him. The name of his line would fade from the council fires, spoken only in whispers when the old ones remembered. The ancestors would find him harder now, the trail colder. Nita's grip tightened once, brief, small. She walked without complaint, though her legs must have ached. She had seen the figures in the smoke, heard the name called in the dark. She carried it still, silent, in the way her eyes sometimes drifted to shadows that were not there. They climbed a low rise, the last rise before the land opened wide and unknown. Taza stopped at the crest. The wind touched his face, cool now, carrying no scent of smoke or people. He knelt, opened the pouch, and let the ashes spill slow onto the earth. Gray dust settled into the grass, mingling with the dirt. He pressed his palm flat against the ground once, then drew it back. Nita stood beside him, small hand still in his. She looked first toward the valley they had left, the faint glow of fires, the dark line of the ridge, then turned her face forward. Her eyes held no fear, no question. Small against the darkening sky. The wind small against the darkening sky. The wind followed quiet, brushing their backs without force. Somewhere ahead, a single bird called once, clear, unanswered. The light faded. The land swallowed them step by step, until only the outline remained. Two shapes moving slow toward whatever waited beyond the last rise. The silence held. No promise, no end. Only the sound of boots on earth, small breaths in the cooling air, and the quiet weight of what they carried forward. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths, some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories. From our hearts to yours, thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal/disclaimer. Each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals, narration, and script development, the emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.